Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Glenn McGowan. This is Atlas Bowen. Today I'm finally going to get my freshly painted parts put on the E46. If you're just tuning in, I smashed the front of this thing a couple months ago. I sourced a parts car for the hood and the bumper and some other pieces. The condition of those were just not in great shape, so I decided to do the bodywork on them and paint them. And these are fresh out the paint booth as of last night. So I'm essentially going to do a kind of step-by-step hood replacement and bumper replacement on this car. I have to get my front bumper off first to get the fog lights and a couple pieces out of it to swap over. This bumper had a lot of the inserts and like fog light trim already in there, which I'm going to use, but I want to use the fog lights out of this and a couple other pieces, so I'm going to get that off first, swap those things over, and put this back on. I'm also going to assess underneath. I think I got to replace the driver's side bumper shock because that got smashed in when I hit the car. So I'm going to get into that today and get this stuff on so I can get this thing kind of put behind me and move on to something else. This week's video is brought to you by LCOBMW parts. Visit our online store for E36, E46, and E90 parts, or follow us on Instagram at LCOBMW. All the links are in the description below. Okay, the bumper removal procedure is pretty straightforward on these, and it's essentially the same for all E46 99 to 06. So there's two bumper bolts that go up under the bumper here. Now they're different styles, whether it's a coupe or a sedan, or if it's a sport bumper on a sedan, but I'm not gonna get into that. But anyway, so I'm using torque socket here to get up underneath here. Now, the correct way to do this essentially is to remove this fog light trim here, which looks like this, and they're essentially clipped in around the fog light, but they can be kind of hard and the tabs can break. So with this, I'm not really worried about this bumper because it's junk, obviously. So I'm just essentially putting this up in here and just pushing, and it's just kind of bending this fog light trim down a little bit. The sedans don't have this at all, so it's a little bit easier to get. So without that fog light trim, this thing would just come right out, be a lot easier, but this is what this bolt looks like. If you had a sedan or a touring, like wagon, it would be a more of a male torque socket sticking out. Besides that, this is the bolt down in coupes and on sport bumpers too, this style bolt. So there's another one there, and then there's a series of 8mm screws underneath here, and then I think there's one behind the fender here, or like the lower fender liner right in front of the wheel on either side, and then it just slides right off, but you gotta be careful because you got your horn connectors, your fog light connectors and stuff like that, so you don't wanna pull that stuff off. So I got the bolts out and I got all the screws out, and now I'm essentially just gonna pop this thing right out, and then I'll zoom in, I'll show you exactly where all the screws are and stuff like that. So if you are doing this, you'll have a better reference. So, pretty easy, as you can see, it just pops right off. So I'm gonna zoom in here and maybe we'll look at some of the damage. I see a little spot in here too that looks like it was pushed back a little bit. So as far as the bumper is concerned, this is the screw that you get from inside the wheel well, which is essentially here, like that. And you can actually sneak in here, even though this car is low, you can actually sneak in here with a shallow 8mm socket and get those. And then underneath is one here. And then there's another one under there. There's just the one underneath the brake duct there, and the same thing on the other side. And these slide in on those guides right here like that. And this is what the bumper shock looks like, that through bolt goes up in there like that. So that's essentially the easiest and quickest way to get this thing off. If you're replacing just a bumper cover, now you got to take all the plastic rivets and push pins out of this to replace the cover over the bar. I have all that, so I don't have to bother with that. Horn, fog light. As far as the connectors, you have to disconnect before you pull the bumper off, and there's this here and the same on the other side. I wanted to zoom in real quick too and show you this bumper shock. You can see right up to here. I don't know if I can get a better shot there, but you can see there's a mark in the dust where this thing went all the way back. Essentially this much of it was exposed, so it pushed this much back into the car, which is doing its job. And you can also see too here, this is pushed back, like the flange of this is bent in a little bit there, and a little bit of the rad support is bent in. So I'm essentially gonna pull this off real quick. There's just 4 13mm head nuts and then 2 rivets right there, which I'll drill out. This will pull out, I'll put a new one back in there, probably bend this out a little bit just to straighten it a little bit, but you could see that is the culprit right there from it being pushed back in. This part of the bumper bar pushed that in. So all in all, not a lot of damage at all, which is kind of nice. Okay, I'm gonna start by drilling out these rivets. So you're simply just drilling the head of the rivet off. This is like a 3/16 drill bit, I believe. And there's 3 13mm nuts. Just like that. See that? It shouldn't do that at all. So that thing is frickin' spent. So got another one. The plus side in the parts business, free parts. I am going to try to just bend this back a little bit. These little studs that come out of here, they're actually part of the front frame horn. So I'm just going to try to pry up on that a little bit. That'll do it. Slide this back in. Now you can rivet these if you wanted to. I just try to align the holes and then tighten them down. It's not the end of the world if you don't rivet it. It's a little alignment thing. Just gonna put a little screwdriver in here to keep it aligned, but I snug it down. Torque spec on that, tight. So now I'm gonna take some of the stuff off of my original bumper here. Just wanted to show you all the little pieces in here. So this is the fog light assembly, and this is like a bracket on the back. You essentially have to take this off there. There's a couple screws there. There is this brake duct. It's like the front part of the brake duct. These always break. As you can see, that's snapped there. I do have a good set off of the donor car here that I'm gonna clean up and use. So that's gonna come off now. So the fog light trim that I was talking about earlier here, this, you can see these are attaching points for it here. So this is a good time to actually push these through, because you gotta take these off to access the fog lights. You see the screws are actually, you get them from the front side. So that's gotta come off. You push these in there, and then if you look up in there, next to the fog light, there's one of these on either side. So you have to essentially pop this out here, and then the other one is down there. You can't really see it, but right down there, you pop the cover off, and then you can get to the fog light. Now moving right along, if you had to swap your horns over, there's a 10mm underneath there. That comes right off. This is the center grill section here that has just push clips in there like that. I have one there of the other one, because this one was painted, obviously it was repainted before this front bumper, so like it's gray on the other side and black back here, so I'm not going to use that. I wanted original looking. And same thing over here, horn, fog light, brake duct. So I got everything off from the backside. Now, besides the fog light trim that you have to take off to get to the fog lights, there's this front piece here that clips in and goes all the way across here. This has to come off too, just to access the lower fog light screws. So essentially, if you're changing your fog light in your car, you don't need to take the bumper off, obviously. It's designed to get it from the front, but you have to take that long piece of trim off, and then the fog light, you know, trim pieces, these things, just to get to the fog light from the front. 2 screws, and then there's like 1 push pin clip up the top here. Just like that. And I can put this stuff back over on the new bumper and get that back on. Now I'm just moving all like fog lights and all the little stuff over now. I am going to put the fog light trim and that long piece of trim in last, just so I can get those bumper bolts in there without scratching up the new paint. I also got these new lights here for the side. The driver's side one was broken originally, and I had gotten them then and put those in, but I pulled that one out of the old bumper, and then I have a new right one here I'm gonna pop in here. The bad thing about these painted parts is that it's gonna make the rest of the car kind of look like crap. It's like forcing me to like paint it sooner, which I don't really want to do. All right, so I got it all back together. Lights are in. Center grille is in. I even have this little black strip in here too. So I'll put this last couple pieces in once I hang it on the car. Okay, slide this thing back on. Gotta hook up all my stuff first. Just have to make sure it's on the guides as you push it back in. Alright, that's done. Throw some bolts in, throw the screws in, and you should be good to go. Alright, now I'm just going to throw in these last pieces here, just this front piece of trim and then the fog light trims, and then I can get onto the hood here. Pretty easy. Give you a zoom in here real quick. So it looks really nice. And it's got the black grille, the black fog light trim, like it should be from the factory, instead of the gray like it was before. So the bumper's done. Now I'm gonna move on to the hood. I'm essentially taking everything off of this. I'm taking the insulator off. I'm gonna be fishing out the wiring harness that runs up to the wiper squirters. I'm gonna be pulling off that wiper squirter grill that's in the back, that kind of clips in from the back. I'm gonna take off the hood latches here, because this is all stuff that I had on the car originally that's in good shape. So I'm gonna just transfer all that over to the new hood. The grills can stay on this, because this is actually a facelift hood 04 to 06, which does fit on here, but covers the headlights a little bit. And the hood I have is the correct one for the car. So I'm just gonna get started now by starting taking some of this stuff off. I'll give you just a close-up view of the things that you're gonna need and how everything kind of comes off. Okay, so starting up front, this latch here, this release latch here, and that one, these are all Torx 30s. So you just pull all of those off. Now the insulator here, they're all Phillips head, essentially like push style screw-in clips here. So you take all those out and then it just kind of just pulls out, and there it's kind of tucked in here too, which we'll get to. And then you have your harness that runs up along here like that. It goes in here and then it goes out here. And then there's your connector here, and all these hoses here, this is all for the actual squirters themselves, for the washer fluid. So I'm gonna pull all of that off too. Okay, now I'll do the insulation here. And at this point, we can just kind of pull it out of here. It's just essentially kind of tucked up in here. So if you get it from like the center, it just kind of pulls out. And then it pulls out like that. So that's what that looks like there. These are the little pieces that slide in the hood, and then it slides in up top like that. Pretty simple. Okay, moving on to this harness piece here. There is a zip tie in here from the factory back here that you gotta cut. There that is there, you get that out of the way. And then there is a push pin style clip right here holding this harness. So there's no real good way to get this out. I just essentially slowly pry it out and then it pops out. That, and there's some grommets here. That, set that aside. And now we're gonna just disconnect the wiring and the hose from this piece here. So there is a grommet here too, and pull out, put aside. And the harnesses are kind of clipped back in these little metal things. And I pulled off the hose that goes to the rest of the squirter pieces here, because this hose piece is going to go back through the hood like that. The rest of the harness is kind of fished up top here like this. One more connector here. Disconnect that, and now I can pull everything through. Okay, so that's out now. So now I'm going to just pull this whole piece out of here. I actually need the squirters too, so you gotta kind of pry back on one side and push it forward outside of the hood like that. So I disconnected the hose from the actual squirter itself. I will zoom in here and show this to you in a minute. These little retainers that hold the hose in here, they just clip into part of the hood there. So I'm just gonna sit this down here for now. And this grill piece has tabs up top. You're just essentially pushing them down. That. Just clips at the bottom too. Alright, so that it's out. Set that aside. Now essentially I'm just pushing these squirters through up top like this. So this is the zoom in of what the squirter looks like here from the side. And on the back of this, you have two options to get this out. This one, I pulled this piece out, this clips into it. And it looks like one of the pieces is kind of broken off. But on the other side, I didn't disconnect it there. I just took it off of the squirter end of the hose. So it's whatever's easier to get that off. So I'm ready to unbolt the hood from the hinges here. Now, if you're doing this by yourself, the trick would be to get some sort of like hood support. I just have a piece of wood holding it up, and you're going to essentially loosen the top bolts, because the top bolt is in a U part of the hinge like this. So you just loosen those and you take the bottom one out. So it's sitting on that bolt in that U, and then you can lift the hood straight up. I'll show you, but right now let me just get these bolts out. And the bottom ones come all the way out. If you don't have the hood prop in there, it'll start moving forward like that. Or if you have someone to help you, that's probably a lot easier. They just stand on the other side and do the other side, and you equally hold the hood up, but what fun is that? And the top one, I'm just gonna loosen it a decent amount, so it's kind of pretty loose in there, like that. Do the other side. I kind of lift it up to the back, like yes. And now you can kind of just muscle it forward and get it out. So that's what the hinge looks like there. And then the back of the hood is like that. So you leave that bolt in there. So I'm gonna take these out for the new hood, swap them over, and do the same thing putting it back on. So now I'm getting ready to put the new hood on. So normally you'd want someone else to help you put your freshly painted hood on your car. I'm a little impatient and no one's here right now to help me, so I'm gonna pick this thing up, put it on myself. Done it before countless times, so let's just keep our fingers crossed and hope I don't scratch it or anything. Not bad, a little stressful on the joints too, and getting older. It hurts a little bit in the shoulders. So now I'm just gonna align the hinges up to like the original markings that are on the hood. So you'll see when you get in there, where the old hinge sat against the hood, line that up the best you can, almost like mirror that, and then snug down the screws, because you're gonna wanna check it a couple times before you tighten it down. So I'm gonna do the other side, and this is the perfect time before you put the latches on to check it and make sure all your gaps are tight. And you may have to adjust this a little bit at a time to make sure your gaps are equal, but you'll get it pretty close by just lining up those holes. It'll be a good starting point. So just tightening those down in the original factory spots, you can see how good the gaps are there and there. So they're almost spot on. So if you just kind of get those lined up where the holes are, you should be good to go. Okay, so now it's time to put everything back. I'm gonna start with the wiper panel here. I got the grill already in, so I'm gonna push these squirters through. I'm gonna run this back through. If you take your time and use this longer end of the connector first, once you get that kind of in there, you're gonna kind of have to put your finger in there, then you'll pull everything else through. So it's not hard. It's a pretty good angle where you, now it's making a liar out of me. Normally it's pretty easy. Usually the first or second try you kind of get it. All right, so I got it. It was my 6th try. Okay, wiper stuff's done. All wiring's done. I'm slowly working my way back up here. Gonna throw this bad boy back in. So I'm putting these latches back. So I'm starting with the main latches, not the release once you pop the hood, but the ones that fully latch it to the car that go into the radiator support. So it's the same thing with the hinges. You want to line it up to the original marking on the hood, and the same thing with the bolts, and that'll get you close. So just snug them in place, try them to see if it feels kind of loose as you're pushing it down, that they're actually going into the hole of the lower latch. And if they're in there okay, then you can snug them down, push it, latch it, see how the resistance is with the hood handle. If that pops real nice, then you're good to go, but you could just play around with it a little bit. But with the grills out, you can actually see how it's going down into the lower latch. All right, here goes nothing. Get my light. Okay, now I can lift it back up and tighten it down, and then I'll put the grills in first, and then I'll put that other latch through that, because sometimes it's a little bit easier to put the grills in, then fish that latch through, because sometimes putting the grills, because they're two pieces, they sandwich together, it's like a pain in the butt to kind of get everything in there, so that's the plan. Okay, got my grills here. So these are actually the original BMW grills. Now, this is kind of crazy because these things are like $170, like brand new through BMW. These ones were on this hood originally from the donor car, and they're actually in pretty good shape. The chrome isn't perfect, there's some very light pitting in there, but the quality of these is just so much nicer than like I had a set of like cheap ones from like Amazon or eBay or something before. They were like 50 bucks for the set and they were okay, but they just didn't fit correctly and they kind of moved around in there. But the OEM ones are really nice, and it's just kind of unfortunate that they just break a lot and you can kind of have issues with them. For the price point, it's kind of crazy, but I've got a set, so I'm good to go. I mean, it sits in there so nicely. I'll probably break it putting it in. There we go. All right, one clipped in. There we go. Beautiful. Number 2. So pretty. Okay, so just a release latch and then I'm good to go. Okay, last piece. Same concept before, just line the holes up and the markings. You can see like the second notch in the grill. Okay, all done. This looks really, really good. Okay, so that's a wrap. So this car is back together. It looks absolutely awesome. There's just a couple little specks in the clear coat, which I'm gonna cut and buff probably next video or one after or whatever. I'm just gonna drive it for now since it's kind of back on the road. So I'm really happy with the way everything turned out. It looks absolutely awesome. So really easy repair to do too. So if you get into a light collision or something like that, sourcing the new parts and throwing them back on there is really super easy to do. So if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. Thanks for watching.